Welcome to 8 Digital Podcast, and today we will talk about the military capabilities of Iran and Israel.
Yes, these two countries, they've been very prominent recently, haven't they? Lots of back and forth.
Exactly. And it raises a lot of questions, about their actual strengths, their weaknesses.
For sure.
So what we want to do today is kind of walk you through the key components. We're talking manpower, weapons, air power, defenses.
Even nuclear capabilities, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just to give you a clearer picture of the facts as we understand them. This isn't about predicting outcomes or anything like that.
No, not at all. It's more about understanding the power dynamics,
Yeah.
looking at the pieces on the board, so to speak, the size, the tech, the specific systems they have.
Right. It gives you insight into what they could potentially do.
Exactly. Their priorities, their potential strategies.
Okay, so let's start with, the most basic thing.
Yeah.
People. Manpower. Who has the advantage? Just in sheer numbers.
When you look at active personnel, Iran definitely has the edge there. Quite a significant one.
How many are we talking?
They field around 600,000 active soldiers. And on top of that, they've got a pretty sizable reserve force, too.
Right.
Estimated at about 200,000. And their structure is interesting as well. It's split
Split how?
between the conventional army and then the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC.
Ah, the IRGC. We hear a lot about them.
Yeah, they're a powerful group. They handle things like border security, but also, international operations and influence. Within the whole structure, their Navy is about 18,000 people, Air Force roughly 37,000, and Air Defense around 15,000.
So hundreds of thousands active for Iran. How does Israel compare on the manpower front?
Israel has a smaller active force, around 170,000.
Okay, much smaller.
And this is a key difference, they have a much, much larger reserve force.
Really large.
Close to 450,000. So while Iran has more soldiers ready to go on any given day, Israel can mobilize a very large number of trained people quite quickly if needed.
So it's a different kind of balance. Iran's strength is in the standing army size day-to-day numbers.
Right.
Israel's is in that huge reserve they can call up. Still, active numbers. Iran's ahead.
Correct. The immediate numerical advantage is with Iran.
Got it. Okay, let's shift gears. Something that's been, very visible lately. Missiles. We know Iran has invested heavily here, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. Iran's missile program is widely seen as the largest and probably most diverse in the Middle East.
Largest and most diverse.
Yeah. They've built up a huge arsenal. We're talking hundreds, potentially thousands of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, anti-ship missiles, even drones, which function like missiles in some ways.
And why such a focus there?
Well, partly it's strategic, but also, sanctions have made it really hard for them to buy advanced fighter jets and things like that. So missiles became a key area of development.
Right, kind of an asymmetric approach.
Yeah.
And these missiles, what kind of reach are we talking? Can they actually hit Israel?
Yes. A significant chunk of their ballistic missiles have ranges up to 2,000 kilometers.
2,000 kilometers.
Which puts all of Israel and much of the region well within range. You hear names like the Khorramshahr, the Shahab 3, both can reach that 2,000 kilometer mark.
Yeah.
They also have shorter range ones. Shahab 1 at 300 kilometers, Shahab 2 around 500, Qem 1 is 750, Zulfikar about 700 kilometers.
Right.
And more recently, they've talked about systems like the Fate 110. They describe that one as hypersonic with a range of maybe 300 to 500 kilometers.
Hypersonic. Okay, break that down for us. Why is that significant? What does it really mean?
Well, think of it like this. Regular ballistic missiles fly fast, right? But hypersonic missiles are not just extremely fast, they're also highly maneuverable while they're flying fast inside the atmosphere.
Maneuverable, so they can change direction.
Exactly. That combination of speed and maneuverability makes them incredibly difficult for most current missile defense systems to track and, crucially, to intercept. It really complicates things for defenders.
Wow, okay. Speed and agility. That sounds like a challenge. And you mentioned some experts estimate Iran might have over 3,000 ballistic missiles. That's a huge number.
It's a massive stockpile, yeah. The exact number is debated, but it's certainly in the thousands.
So how does Israel's missile capability stack up against that kind of quantity?
Israel's exact numbers aren't public knowledge, not in the same way. But the key difference here isn't really quantity, it's sophistication.
Sophistication.
Yeah. Israel possesses a collection of very modern missiles. Arguably, the most technologically advanced in the entire region.
What does modern mean here? What makes them different? And what about their ranges?
Modern means things like better guidance systems, much higher accuracy, electronic countermeasures to defeat defenses, maybe even stealth features. They're just more effective and harder to stop than older designs.
Okay.
And their ranges vary. They have types covering everything from shorter ranges, like maybe 280 kilometers, all the way up to, well, an impressive 6,500 kilometers with systems like the Jericho 3.
6,500 kilometers, that's intercontinental range.
Pretty much. These are systems developed over decades, some with partners like the US, others developed domestically. You hear names like Delilah, Gabriel, Harpoon, the Jericho series 1, 2, and 3, Lorare, Popeye.
So, for you trying to understand this, it sounds like a classic trade-off. Iran might have the sheer numbers and a lot of systems that can reach Israel.
Right.
While Israel might have fewer overall, but they're much more advanced, more accurate, and some have significantly longer reach. Quantity versus quality playing out again.
Precisely. That's a really good way to put it. And you see variations of that same theme in other areas too, like ground forces, tanks, artillery, that kind of thing.
Okay, let's look at the ground then. Lay out the numbers for us. What does Iran have?
Iran has a very large inventory on paper, around 10,513 tanks.
10,000 tanks.
Yeah, a huge number. Plus almost 6,800 artillery pieces,
Yeah.
640 armored vehicles, and at least 50 helicopters specifically for the army.
Okay, massive numbers.
Yep.
And Israel's ground forces?
Significantly fewer in those categories, around 400 tanks.
Only 400 compared to over 10,000.
That's the comparison, yes. About 530 ground-to-ground artillery pieces, and maybe 1,190 armored vehicles.
So again, Iran has this clear numerical superiority in the core heavy equipment on the ground, tanks, artillery.
That's correct. If you're just looking at a spreadsheet of heavy armor numbers, Iran looks dominant on the ground. Now, how effective that equipment is, maintenance levels, training, that's another question. But the raw numbers favor Iran.
Okay, now let's turn to the Air Force, often seen as decisive in modern conflicts. What's the picture there?
Well, this is widely seen as a major, perhaps the major area of weakness for Iran.
A weakness, why?
Their Air Force is largely made up of aircraft that are, frankly, quite old, decades old.
How old are we talking?
We're talking about planes from the 1970s, US-made jets like the F-4 Phantom, F-5 Tiger, even the F-14 Tomcat.
F-14s, they still fly those.
They do. These were all bought before the 1979 revolution. Their main workhorse is often considered the Russian Su-24, which itself was developed way back in the 1960s. Now, they have acquired a few more advanced Russian planes, like some Su-35s, some MiG-29s, and they've developed some local jets too. But these are pretty limited in number, or their actual capabilities are questioned compared to modern Western or even later Russian designs.
So they have a decent number of planes on paper. About how many?
Around 312 conventional fighter jets, plus another 23 or so listed under the IRGC. But again, the age and the technology level are the critical limitations.
Okay, a large fleet, but mostly vintage. What about Israel's Air Force?
Israel's Air Force is, well, it's the opposite story. Technologically advanced, highly trained, and considered vastly superior.
Superior how? What do they fly?
They operate around 241 active fighter jets, fewer than Iran's total number, but the key is what they are. They have the latest US-made F-35 stealth jets.
Ah, the F-35. We hear a lot about that. What does stealth actually give them?
Think of stealth not as making a plane invisible, but as making it extremely difficult to detect on radar, especially the older types of radar systems that Iran mostly operates.
So they can sneak in.
Well, they have a much better chance of flying into defended airspace without being effectively tracked or targeted. It gives them a huge advantage in survivability and allows them to strike targets that older, non-stealth planes couldn't safely reach.
And besides the F-35?
They also have modern versions of the F-15 and F-16, which are still very capable aircraft, plus about 48 dedicated attack helicopters.
So this is where that technology versus quantity thing really shows up, isn't it?
Absolutely. In the air domain, Israel's technological edge with planes like the F-35 likely gives them outright air superiority, despite having fewer total aircraft. It's a critical difference. Control the air, and you control a lot of the battlefield.
Makes sense. Okay, moving from the air to the sea, what about their navies?
Based on what we know, neither country has really fully demonstrated major naval power projection recently, but both have significant forces.
What are the numbers?
Iran lists about 101 ships and 19 submarines. That gives them a substantial presence, especially in the Persian Gulf.
And Israel?
Israel has a smaller surface fleet, about 67 coastal warfare ships, and 5 submarines.
So Iran has more ships, more submarines, but the overall strategic picture at sea seems a bit less clear-cut, maybe.
Yeah, it's harder to gauge the exact balance without more operational details. Both have capabilities, but it's not the same stark contrast as, say, the Air Forces.
Okay. Let's talk drones. They've become incredibly important, haven't they?
Hugely important, and drones are actually considered a real area of strength for Iran.
A strength? Interesting. Why is that?
Well, partly it goes back to the sanctions. Because getting advanced manned aircraft was so hard, they invested heavily in developing their own modern drone capabilities locally.
And what makes their drones effective?
They're often designed to be relatively low cost, but still pack a punch. Some fly at low altitudes, which helps them evade radar detection, similar to cruise missiles in some ways.
Right.
And we've seen their effectiveness, or at least the effectiveness of drones based on their designs, in conflicts like the one in Ukraine. They've proliferated quite a bit.
Okay. And Israel's drone capabilities, are they also strong there?
Oh, absolutely. Israel is a world leader in drone technology. They have very sophisticated systems. Think of the Heron drone, which is for high-altitude, long-endurance surveillance, and the Harap, which is what they call a loitering munition, sometimes called a suicide drone. It finds a target and attacks it directly.
So Israel has the high-tech end there, too.
Yes. Very advanced surveillance and attack drones. There are even examples cited of other countries, like India, using Israeli drones in their own conflicts.
So it sounds like both countries are strong in drones, but maybe coming at it from different angles. Iran using them partly to compensate for other limitations, Israel integrating them into their overall high-tech military system.
That's a good way to look at it, yeah. Drones are a key part of the modern arsenal for both, serving different strategic purposes, perhaps.
Now, we need to touch on the most sensitive area, potentially the most decisive nuclear capabilities. What's the situation there?
Well, the information available states very clearly that Israel holds a crucial, decisive superiority here.
Decisive superiority.
Okay.
But Israel doesn't officially say they have nuclear weapons, do they?
No, that's correct. They have a long-standing policy of ambiguity, neither confirming nor denying. But pretty much all international bodies and arms control experts agree they do have them.
And any idea how many?
Estimates vary, of course, but organizations like the U.S.-based Arms Control Association suggest they might have up to 90 nuclear warheads.
90 warheads. Okay, and Iran?
Iran is widely accused of trying to build nuclear weapons, though Tehran insists its program is purely for peaceful energy purposes.
Right.
They have taken significant steps to protect their nuclear facilities, burying them deep underground and setting up defenses around them.
And there have been incidents related to this, haven't there? The information mentioned a specific strike.
Yes, it notes a reported Israeli strike on June 13th that targeted Iranian nuclear and military sites. It also mentions reports that the head of the IRGC, General Hossein Salami, along with 2 senior officers and some nuclear scientists, were killed in that event.
Okay.
And it includes the statement attributed to Supreme Leader Khamenei afterwards, saying Israel would pay a heavy price. These are reported details surrounding the ongoing tensions over Iran's nuclear program.
So when we talk about decisive superiority, it really means Israel is understood to be an established nuclear power, while Iran is suspected of aspiring to be one. That's a fundamental strategic difference, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Having a nuclear arsenal, even an undeclared one, provides a level of deterrence that fundamentally changes the strategic calculus. It outweighs many conventional advantages.
Right. Okay, finally, let's talk about defense. Specifically, defense against missiles and air attacks, which seems crucial given Iran's missile strength.
Yes. Iran has its own air defense systems. They use some Russian-made systems like the older S-200 and the more modern S-300. They also have their own domestically developed system called the Bavar 373, which they claim is comparable to the S-300.
So they have defenses. What about Israel? Their systems are quite famous.
They are. Israel has invested massively in creating a very sophisticated, multi-layered air and missile defense shield. It's considered among the best, if not the best, in the world.
Multi-layered, what does that mean?
It means they have different systems optimized to intercept different kinds of threats at different altitudes and ranges. It's not just one system trying to do everything.
Can you walk us through those layers?
Sure. At the lowest level, for things like short-range rockets, artillery shells, mortars, the kind of threats they often face from closer ranges, you have the Iron Dome system.
Iron Dome. Very well known.
Extremely well known and generally very effective against those specific threats. Then for medium-range threats, things like cruise missiles, larger rockets, maybe shorter-range ballistic missiles, they have David's Sling.
David's Sling. Okay, range on that.
It's designed for threats in the range of about 40 kilometers up to 300 kilometers.
Got it. And the top layer for the bigger threats.
That's the Arrow system. Primarily Arrow 2 and the more advanced Arrow 3. These are designed to intercept ballistic missiles, including medium and potentially longer range ones. But the key point is that Arrow is designed to engage long-range ballistic missiles like the types Iran possesses, very far from Israeli territory, high up. It gives them a chance to neutralize the biggest threats long before they get close.
So that whole layered system, Iron Dome, David Sling, Arrow, provides multiple chances to shoot down incoming threats.
Exactly. It creates a much more robust defense against a wide spectrum of aerial and missile attacks. It's a critical counterweight to Iran's large missile arsenal.
Okay, so if we try to put all these pieces together, what are the main takeaways for you trying to understand this comparison?
Well, looking at the whole picture, Iran's military strength seems to really lie in its numbers. More active soldiers, many more tanks and artillery pieces on paper, and of course that very large and diverse missile arsenal, plus their significant local drone development, which was kind of driven by sanctions.
Numbers, missiles, drones.
Okay.
And Israel's strengths.
Israel's power seems firmly rooted in technological superiority, almost across the board.
Like where specifically?
Most clearly in their Air Force, vastly more advanced planes, their very sophisticated, multi-layered missile defense systems we just talked about, their own collection of very modern missiles, and maybe most importantly, that decisive edge with their established nuclear capability. And they compensate for having fewer active troops with that very large, well-trained reserve force and a constant focus on high-tech solutions and training.
So it really is a fascinating contrast, isn't it? You have one military seemingly built on large numbers, significant ground force equipment, and specific offensive reach with missiles and drones, versus another built fundamentally on advanced technology, particularly air power, sophisticated defenses, and that ultimate strategic deterrent of nuclear weapons.
It really is a stark contrast in military philosophies and structures, shaped by their unique histories, geographies, and geopolitical situations.
So thinking about these different kinds of strengths, sheer numbers and quantity on one side, versus advanced technology, air superiority, and crucial strategic capabilities like nuclear weapons and defense systems on the other, it leaves you with a pretty interesting question to mull over, doesn't it?
It does.
When these very different approaches to military power potentially face each other, which aspects actually prove most critical in the complex reality of modern warfare? Is it the numbers or the technology? Where does the balance of power truly lie?